Welcome to ePathshala PG courses on computer science. The course is about web technology and today is the 7th module, and let us see about Xhtml and about the basics of XML. The objective of this module is to learn about the Xhtml syntax, its tags and the document type definitions, and we will use Xhtml hereafter to create web pages. And in order to understand the Xhtml, the syntax of Xhtml, let us also see about the basics of how to create an XML document. So, what is basically an Xhtml? And the last module we have seen about HTML in elaborate, about the tags, its syntax, and about the different features that are supported in HTML, such as frames, forms, creating tables, images, hyperlinks and so on. So, basically HTML provides these basic tags to create web pages, which is mainly for presenting a document in a browser. So, to display a document, we are basically using a scripting language, a client side scripting client side HTML language called an HTML, and Xhtml is an improved version of this HTML, which is called as the extensible hypertext markup language, and it is actually a HTML document, but it is defined as an XML application, and it has more cleaner and stricter HTML tags, and it is also compatible with the earlier versions of HTML4, and it is also supported by all the browsers. And Xhtml is basically to define and to organize the page content, but it is not for formatting or styling it. So, Xhtml uses the basic tags of HTML, and it also includes the elements and attributes of XML, and it also conforms to the syntax of XML. So, Xhtml uses the basic tags like elements, the attributes whatever supported in HTML, and it also includes the rules or the syntax of an XML. So, XML, we know that it is also markup language called an extensible markup language, but we will see in detail about XML after once we know about what is actually an Xhtml. So, why you go for an Xhtml? So, we saw about how it all evolved, we saw how these markup languages evolved from the standardized markup language like SGML to nowadays we call it as HTML5, and before we had HTML5 we had a markup language called Xhtml. So, here we can see an example. So, this is a bad HTML document, but it all works finer in most browsers, even though it is not obeying any HTML rules. So, here you can see that we have a tag like HTML head and body, but we can see that this head tag, body tag are not closed, whereas the HTML tag is closed. So, this is a bad HTML document, but it displays well in most of the browsers. But what happens when you open the same document in a handheld device, which means that you may have browsers in your handheld devices, but these handheld devices have small computing power, and these handheld devices cannot interpret this bad markup language. So, HTML was once initially designed to structure the data and to display the data, but XML is designed to describe and structure the data. So, this Xhtml specifies that everything must be marked up correctly. So, let us see about what are the basic syntactic rules of this Xhtml. So, Xhtml elements must be properly nested. That is the first rule we will see when you start defining the elements in Xhtml. So, here you can see that a bold tag is there, and next you have a tag like an italic tag, but what happens here, before you close this italic tag, we are closing the bold tag and then the italic tag. So, this is not properly nested. So, we need to correct the syntax of the previous thing as like this. So, here the italic is closed, the inner tag is closed, and bold tag is the outer tag which is closed afterwards. And the next rule that has to be followed is when you define an XHTML elements, it must always be closed. In HTML there are some elements for which you do not have a closing tag, but in Xhtml all the tags has to be properly closed. So, here you can see that in HTML you have a paragraph tag for which you do not have an end tag or a close tag, and you have a break tag for which you do not have a closing tag. You have an image tag in HTML for which you do not have a closing tag, whereas in Xhtml when you define the same tags, it has to be properly closed. So, here you can see that this is your opening tag and this is the closing tag, and Xhtml elements must be in lower case. So, you do not allow mixing of cases when you define the tags or elements. All the Xhtml elements must be in lower case. And the next criteria is that Xhtml element must have one root element. So, every Xhtml document has to have a single root element. This is actually a rule that is we apply in an XML. So, here we can see that the root element of the document of a HTML document is going to be a HTML tag, which contains an head tag and a body tag. And there are other syntactic rules that has to be followed in Xhtml or all attributes name. We saw about the elements or tags, but here we need to know about there is another thing that comes within a tag, that is along with the element. To describe the element we have attributes. So, the attribute names must also be lower case and the attribute values must be quoted, it should be in double quotes. Here you can say that table is the element and it has an attribute like width. So, width is given as 300 pixel, which is allowed in HTML, whereas in Xhtml you can see that this attribute values has to be properly closed. So, it is put within double quotes, and normally the ID attributes replaces the name attribute. So, we will have a name attribute, whereas here in order to parse this Xhtml document, it is better to use an ID attribute. And Xhtml DTD also defines mandatory elements, and then we can see that like attribute minimization. Say for example, here you have an example like input checked and input disabled. So, minimize the attribute values are minimized here, whereas these things are forbidden in Xhtml. So, you can see that the element input, the attribute name is checked, which is equal to the value checked. So, you cannot minimize the attributes. And what is the general format of an Xhtml document? It starts with a doc type. So, doc type is a mandatory, as we see in the last slide. We saw that there are some elements which are mandatory in Xhtml document. So, the doc type is a mandatory element in an Xhtml document. So, an Xhtml document starts with the doc type and then it defines what is the type of DTD we are going to use for this Xhtml document. And then we saw that there should be a root element for an Xhtml document and it should be a single root element. So, this document has got an element, root element called HTML. Within this HTML, you can see that HTML opened and closed. Within that, you had head and then there is another section called body. So, the mandatory elements are doc type, the HTML, head, title, body, these elements are mandatory. Now, we see that there should be a doc type definition for an Xhtml document. So, like XML, to define what is actually the content of an XML document or to describe the XML document, we need to go for defining the XML document with a format like document type definition. So, this DTD defines the syntax of a document that is written in any of this markup languages like HTML, XML or Xhtml. So, when you have some contents in these documents, these contents are described. What is the content you have in the web document is described using a document type definition. In short, we call it as DTD. So, it specifies the hierarchical structure of the document and it also specifies what are the element names and what are the types of the elements you have, and it also specifies the element content type, what the data that you can put within an element, and it also specifies the attribute names and its values. And we can see that XML has 3 kinds of DTD, it can support 3 kinds of DTDs, like a DTD can be a strict DTD, or you can have a transitional DTD, and or you can have a frame set DTD. So, when the first we saw that you have a tag called doc type, which always specify what type of DTD you are going to use for the document. So, we will see that here the doc type that has to be specified on the first line, and here you can see that the type of the document you are creating is an HTML, which means that it is an Xhtml document, and you say that it is public because you are using as you are going to use it from the outside, and then you say that it is the doc type what you are going to use is in transitional doc type. So, here you specify, you give an URL and say that it is in transitional DTD, which means that this doc type has to follow the rules that has to be given in like a transitional DTD. So, the doc type tells the browser which language is used for the set of instructions that we are going to follow. And we normally use an Xhtml transitional because which is more flexible than strict type. So, the rules are flexible in Xhtml transitional, and we will normally get into a doc type. We define a document type definition of an Xhtml transitional doc type. And this W3C they have recommended, as I told, they have recommended 3 kinds of DTDs to identify the markup languages that is used in a web page. So, here we can see that an Xhtml transitional doc type, or one can use an Xhtml 1.0 strict doc type, or one can use an Xhtml 1.0, it is a frame set. So, here transitional is less strict, has a less strict specification than the strict doc type, but and it also allows the use of the cascading style sheets, we will see later, and the traditional formatting instructions that are in HTML are also allowed in this transitional doc type. When you go for strict type, it requires an exclusive use of an cascading style sheets and all other features. And we will use an HTML 1.0 frame set doc type when the pages are required with using an Xhtml frames. When you go for frames, better to use an Xhtml 1.0 frame set doc type. This is a sample of an DTD, how a DTD will look like. So, once you write an Xhtml document, you try to describe the document using a DTD. So, here it starts with the doc type and it starts describing this is the name of the root element of the Xhtml document. The root element is given, and within which in an Xhtml document you will have elements and attributes. So, these are all defined in this DTD, and how to define we will see the syntax later. Now, we will just have a look of how a DTD will look like. So, it is actually this DTD is written within an Xhtml file. So, you have an Xhtml file which has elements, attributes and the other things related to like entities, namespaces, so on, and the description of this Xhtml document is given in a DTD, which is also included along with this Xhtml file. Now, we will see that how you validate this Xhtml, why you want to have a DTD. A DTD is for validating this document, your Xhtml document. We want to know that whether this Xhtml document has followed the rules of follow the basic rules and other syntactic rules by which how it has to be defined. So, here this in order to parse it or in order to validate it, we need to go for a validator or a parser. So, there is an official validator called the validator which is available in this URL, you can see that. So, a valid Xhtml document, what do you mean by a valid Xhtml document? So, whenever it obeys the rules of a DTD that has been specified by the doc type tag. So, this is the starting tag of an Xhtml document. So, whenever it obeys the rules, we call that document as a valid Xhtml document. Now, So, we now what we have learnt is that what is about an Xhtml. So, we basically start learning from HTML and we saw the basic tags and all of the tags that are defined in HTML. And we saw that this HTML is for displaying the content in a browser. So, you start writing an HTML document to display something in your browser. It can be an image, any multimedia content can be shown or displayed on a web browser. So, we can write an HTML document in any form, any way. So, using the tags. So, HTML does not follow any strict rules. So, and we saw that there are tags which has only an opening tag and there is no closing tag. So, HTML is more flexible, one can write an HTML file and this browser will not generate any error, whatever it is the content would be displayed on the browser. So, if there is an error it would be just displayed as a text in the screen of the browser. So, here we enter into another markup language called Xhtml, which is more stricter than HTML, which means that Xhtml combines the rules of XML. So, it is actually an improved version of HTML with along with the rules of an XML. So, we need to learn about what is an XML. So, XML is another markup language which is called as an extensible markup language. It is a meta language and it is used for describing or defining other markup languages. And any markup, this XML, any XML markup language is actually used to provide information about a document. It is not for displaying a document, it does display, it does describing the structure of the document. So, this is actually a meta markup language for text documents or textual data, and we can have our own tags. So, XML basically does not define its tags, but the users are given privileges to create their own tags to provide information about the content of the document. And this what actually an HTML tag. This will tell a browser how to display the document, whereas an XML tag will provide the reader of some idea about what that data means. Now, what is XML used for? Why you want to go for such a markup language? This is mainly you create XML documents to transfer data from one place to another over the internet. And we can see that the XML is totally text based and it supports Unicode texting. And when the XML document is created, it is actually a text file, it contains all data in textual form. So, since it is a text data, it takes very less space and it can be transmitted efficiently. That is the main thing why you go for an XML. It is a standard, XML is a standard which is used in several fields or several places you want to create an XML document. So, an XML document basically describes the document and it describes the document in a textual form. And here you can see that once you create an XML document, it can be displayed differently in different media. So, you can display an XML document as a HTML document, or you can display it as a video, or you can display it as a CD or a DVD and so on. And you only have to change the XML document in order to change all the rest. And the another advantage is an XML documents can be modularized. So, you can make it modularized, which means that you can reuse, if you can modular it, then you can reuse all those parts. Now, we will see an example of an XML document, how an XML document looks like. It starts with an XML, this is a basic element, an XML element, and it gives the version of what XML you are using, and then it starts describing the content. So, here basically it has got a tag like address tag, and these are all not defined tags, these are all user defined tags. And here you can see that within we are defining an address as name, address has got a name and it has got an email, phone and a birthday. So, we can describe our own tags, we can describe the content of the document with our own tags. So, here the markup for the data aids understanding of its purpose, and it is very expressive and it includes the semantics along with the data. And when you write an XML document, it is well structured, it is easy to write, and you can also write programs from it. And the basic difference between HTML and XML. So, HTML tags have a fixed meaning and browser know what it is, which means that HTML tags are predefined and browser know what to do with that tag. Whereas, XML tags are different for different application, it is all user defined and user knows what they mean. It is not for the browser, it is the user knows what they mean. And HTML tags are mainly for displaying, whereas XML tags are used to describe documents and data. And the basic rules of an XML. These rules are the rules that are actually adopted in Xhtml. So, here you can see that the tags should be enclosed in angle brackets, and every tag should come in pair with a start tag and an end tag, and the tags must be properly nested. Here you can see that an example, this is a tag which is not allowed, this is a statement which is not allowed. Why? Because you have name, email, and before closing an email you have closed the name. So, it is not properly nested, whereas here you can see that email is closed and then the outer thing name is closed. And the tags that do not have any end tag must be terminated by a slash. You can see that a break tag. So, this is an empty tag which does not include any content. So, we will say that this is the starting tag as well as the ending tag. So, you put a slash after this. So, break slash. So, it means that this means that it is both the start tag as well as an end tag. This is an example, an HTML example. Now, you can see that the more rules of an XML are, tags are case sensitive. You cannot say that this is same as this. So, here you have a small case, here you have got an uppercase which is not the same. And XML is any combination of cases in XML. If you take a combination of cases, then it is also not allowed as a part of a tag. And tag may not contain these special characters like less than or an ampersand. And the tags follow the basic Java naming conventions. So, it does not start with a number. So, they have to begin with a letter and may not contain any white spaces, but they can have other characters except these characters. They can have characters like even a single colon is allowed when you define a name. And all XML document must have a root tag that begins the document. Now, the type of encoding that is used in XML. So, like Java, this also uses an Unicode to encode the characters. So, Unicode comes in many flavors, and we will see several examples where an XML document is created with an Unicode called UTF-8. So, this is a variable length code, and the characters are encoded in 1 byte, 2 bytes or 4 bytes. And now, we will see that what is meant by well formed documents. So, you create following the basic rules of an XML document. So, once you create an XML document following these rules, you call the document XML document to be well formed. So, an XML document is said to be well formed if it follows all the rules of an XML. And if whether we have followed the rules will be checked by an XML parser. So, we can write our own parsers also, and basically parsers are inbuilt in many browsers like IE5, Netscape 7 and so on, all other new browsers like Chrome, Google Chrome and so on. This XML parser will check whether all the rules are obeyed in that XML document, and these parsers are also freely available. And here Java 1.4 also supports an open source parser. We can also write our own parser. We will see how to write XML parsers. Now, we will see another example. This is an XML document we create which describes about the address. So, here we said that there is an element called address, there is an element called name, and we can see that this name is further defined as first and last, and this name is closed, and then we can see that there is another element like email, it is closed, phone closed, and then we have another element like birthday, and within this birthday you can see that birthday is defined as year, month and day, and everyone is properly closed, and birthday is also closed, and finally the address is closed. So, we describe the address with all these elements. So, it is basically to this description is basically to know what you have in that XML document, what data you have in it, and so it is mainly user centric. And we can see that XML files look like, when you describe the XML document, it actually follows a hierarchical structure. So, XML files are actually trees, and we know that an XML document should have a single root element. So, the address is the root element, and we saw that name was further defined as first and last, and you had email, phone, birthday, and birthday is defined as year, month and day. And what is XML trees? We know that it follows a tree structure, it has a single root, and this tree is actually a general ordered tree, and there can be parent nodes and in the tree, and the parent nodes may have any number of children. The children are ordered, child nodes are ordered, and they may also have siblings. And whenever you want to get information out of the tree, you use an pre-order traversal. So, what is an XML document? It basically has elements, attributes and plus some other details. Now, this is another example. We can see that article, and you have author, title, these are elements, author, title, text. So, this is the text data that is enclosed within this element. Now, coming here, this is an element section, it has an attribute like number, this is the attribute value, and you can see that there is another attribute like title, its value, and you can see that before it closes, it also has a content like text, and within the text you have another element like index. So, you can have mixed content in an XML document. So, now coming to, we saw the basic building blocks of XML, which has elements, attributes and other things. So, we will see that how you define elements in XML documents. So, these elements are actually freely defined tags. So, in the previous example, we saw that article, title, author, all are elements, they all start and end, and then we saw that the element article was the root element, and the elements have a name and a content. The elements may also be nested, they may be empty. So, whenever you create an empty element, you know that it ends with a slash, and the element content is typically, you can see that you have a text data. So, it is actually a character, parsed character data. It will be defined as a type like PC data, and you can, whenever you say that it is a parsed character data, it is defined with strings, defined as strings with special characters, and you can also have mixed content, because along with the character data, you can also have elements, and the elements may also be nested. And each XML document has exactly one root element that forms the tree, and the elements with a common parent are ordered. And the difference between elements and attributes: elements may have attributes, like attributes will have a name and a value. So, here we saw that there is an element called section, which has an attribute like number, its value is 1, all the attributes values has to be enclosed in double quotes. The difference between the elements or attributes are only one attribute with a given name per element you can define it, but for an element you can have an arbitrary number of sub elements, and attributes do not have any structure, it is simply strings, it has values, while elements can have sub elements. So, here you can see that this example, person is an element, and this is born is an attribute, its value, died is another attribute, its value. This is a character, parsed character data, the element is closed, again you have data, it keeps on going. Now, we will see that what is XML namespaces. So, we will in order to avoid collisions, we will have XML namespaces, and we will see about XML namespaces in the next module. So, what we have actually seen in this module? We saw that what is Xhtml, it is an extensible HTML language and which follows the rules of XML. And in order to understand what is XML, we saw an introduction to XML, and we saw that what is XML elements, attributes and namespaces we will see in the next module. Thank you.